Another day of national spring training and another day filled with drama. This time it is with the franchise legend Steven Strasburg. So let's just get right into it. What is going on with this situation and why do the Nationals have to make this so damn difficult?
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as the show page at LO_Nationals. For all your latest Nationals news and notes, just make sure to check us out over on there. And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe over on YouTube. Just search up Locked On Nationals there. We are just a handful of subscribers away from 1,000. That would be very much so appreciated if you were to hit that subscriber button, get there to 1,000. Later on in the show today, though, we're going to be talking about the Nationals signing former sort of pretty damn good pitcher Zach Davies back in the day to a minor league deal after having a very down year in Major League Baseball. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. What could be happening? Could this be kind of the quote-unquote cherry on top of this rotation? Well, that's a funny way to put it. We'll discuss that later on in the show. Kiebert Ruiz, catchers have reported, as well as pitchers, obviously. Is this the year for Kiebert Ruiz to finally kind of have that big breakout season? Because he's got a lot of talent behind the dish. Defensively, he's had some struggles, but also just hasn't really gotten it done ultimately at the plate. We'll discuss that a little bit later on in today's show and what that means for the Washington Nationals moving forward. Let's start off here with Steven Strasburg, because this, in my opinion, is one of the dumbest stories that you could possibly ever have wanted to happen coming out of spring training. But before that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And we're going to get started with the Steven Strasburg news for today's show. There's really no news here, but this is just kind of a story that has been transpiring over time that we have always kind of figured will end in a bad situation. So over the last year, back in 2023, it was announced Steven Strasburg will not be able to pitch again in Major League Baseball. The Nationals understand that. Steven Strasburg understands that. And Scott Boras also understands that. And now we sit here after he was going to have that retirement press conference and it was going to be announced. Then all of a sudden, the day of or the day before, it was announced that that was not going to be happening anymore. And what this is kind of the speculation is that the Lerner ownership group, this is kind of their way of saying, well, let's try to see if we can get some money back here. And that's just kind of what the reports have been saying. We don't necessarily know what could be happening, but it's pretty easy to tell that is kind of what the situation has been. Then, of course, Mike Rizzo, speaking with the media, was asked about Steven Strasburg showing up to camp since he is still technically on the 40-man roster. And when you're still holding up a 40-man roster spot because you haven't really officially retired, even though the Nationals know he can't pitch again, he will be placed on the injured list eventually here. But he was asked if Steven Strasburg is going to show up, and Mike Rizzo had to say this. Yeah, he's invited like every other guy on our 40-man roster, and he told reporters that he's got until February 24th to be here, and yeah, I expect him to be here. This is just an entire situation in which my opinion is completely, number one, avoidable. That is the big kind of overlapping word here. This entire situation has been a joke from the beginning. And it's not necessarily on Mike Rizzo. I don't know who there is to blame at this point, because I know a lot of people out there, a lot of Nationals fans, you're going to want to be out here very upset about a franchise legend like Steven Strasburg and kind of the way that this situation has been handled over time. So you kind of jump into this scenario here and this kind of this cesspool almost of just a complete mess from whichever way that you look at it. If you're Team Strasburg, it is a mess. If you are Team Nationals and you want to see Steven Strasburg give some of the money back, which will never happen in a million years, it's a mess. Where do we begin? Let's kind of peel back this onion layer by layer here. With the Nationals, let's just start off with this. Who is there to blame? Who? right now I sit here today, the easy one to look at is obviously the ownership here. The Nationals ownership over the years, number one, have not been spending the money the way that they probably should be. Number two, when they have spent money, it's kind of ended up like Steven Strasburg disasters like this. You did not put insurance on this contract, and which you know the history of Steven Strasburg. You know that he's had a ton of arm injuries. After 2019, pitched the most innings and by far in his career, was healthy the entire way of that 2019 stretch. You probably should have foreseen that, hey, he could have an injury over the next 7 years or so. You should probably put a little bit of insurance on that contract in order to, if he does have thoracic outlet syndrome surgery, which he did have, you would be able to get some of that money back. The Nationals did not go that route. They insisted, or not insisted, but they obviously looked at it and said, we'll be fine here. Insurance is not cheap, by the way, for a Major League Baseball contract. It's not cheap. It's millions of dollars that you'll be having to spend. So in that sense, it's easy for me to say, why don't you put insurance on this deal? That's enough of that, though. Where this is really bugging me, though, is that the fact is, it is very obvious that you have a franchise icon with Steven Strasburg, someone who could have a statue outside of this park someday, someone that you'll never see a National wear number 37 ever again as long as a team is here in Washington, D.C. That's the kind of icon that we're talking about here with Steven Strasburg. And on top of that, you are now at odds with that franchise icon, someone that is only going to be wearing a Curly W on his hat, someone who will never play for another team in the course of his career. Someone who is obviously a little socially out there, has been pointed out by many beat reporters, many people just over the years. If you've watched Steven Strasburg, he's not really the lightest and friendliest and fluffiest guy who's going to go out there and teach all of his teammates all the different tricks. That's not really his personality. You can't really blame him for not really discussing all these different injuries and kind of the entire situation that has happened over the last few years here. But where you can be upset with is the way that the Nationals have handled this situation. They have not done this in a mature way by any stretch of the imagination. It just has not been. You could go from day one of this, back when they first announced that they are going to be having this retirement press conference for Steven Strasburg and that the Nationals will be honoring him and probably someday retiring that number 37, and which is still going to happen at some point. But if you aren't kind of reading the tea leaves the way that I am, Steven Strasburg at this moment in time, he wants nothing to do with this organization. The way that we have kind of just handled this entire situation from day one has been a complete you-know-what show. It's been terrible. This is not the way that any organization should go about a franchise icon who's won a World Series MVP, who put your team on the back in order to have that 2019 World Series champion logo up in left field there. You can't have that anymore. And the Nationals, the way that they have handled this, number one, you are doing this to Steven Strasburg. Again, a franchise icon, that's number one. Number two, you are doing this to a Scott Boras client. Do you know who Scott Boras is? If you are a listener, everydayer, as we call him, you probably know Scott Boras and what he does. Scott Boras is the handler for all the big-time superstar free agents out there. If this is not a bad situation, which it is, by the way, ditto, he's telling your superstars, don't go here, man. Look how they are handling their franchise icon. Look at the guy that they drafted number one overall, the savior of the franchise back in the day, one of the most prized prospects ever, who was in the Cy Young conversation basically any time that he was healthy. One of the biggest big game pitchers of all time. This is the way that you are handling him. Imagine what Scott Boras is telling his clients in free agency. Imagine if the Nationals were in on Cody Bellinger right now. And let's say the Cubs offer him the same amount of money as the Nationals. Maybe the Nationals added him a little bit more. You don't think Scott Boras is in his ear telling him, you see the way they're handling Steven Strasburg? You want to handle with that? You want to deal with that organization right now? It's just a terrible look. That is the entire part of this process. It's not a good look on the Nationals. And really, let's also kind of be honest here, which I can say this in my opinion. Some people may not be thrilled with what I say here. But Steven Strasburg also could probably show up maybe to spring training. Just show up. Show face. Do something in which the Nationals, they gave you the entire world back in 2019 after you won them a World Series. You gave it them all. You also did your part to deserve that contract, by the way. but also they gave you that. Honor it a little bit and maybe show up. I don't know what the situation is here. I don't know what the fix is here. But the thing is, Steven Strasburg doesn't look all too great. But most importantly, the Nationals, they certainly do not look good by any stretch of the imagination. Britt Giroli from The Athletic, she wrote a great story on this and kind of why the Nationals are handling this situation in just a terrible way. But with the deferral still to come over the next 10 to 15, 20 years on this Steven Strasburg contract, you're not going to be out of it. The Lerner family, they know that. Strasburg, he's probably got all the power here because he can't pitch anymore. He can just show face. The doctor's going to give him the physical and say, yep, still can't pitch, still can't throw a baseball. That'll be it. And he'll probably get sent back home to do more rehab. I don't know what the Nationals want from him here. I don't know what the win is for this Nationals team with the organization. I don't know if there's any winning scenario for Steven Strasburg as well. It's just an entire mess that, as we kind of have seen over the last few months, this is what we're going to be getting into. And in my opinion, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better until some side just comes to an agreement and says, listen, this is what it is. Steven Strasburg can't pitch anymore. He's not going to pitch anymore. And the Nationals, you're going to have to pay him no matter what. That's the contract that you gave him. You gave him that contract. You offered up that number. You didn't insure the deal. This is why you have to pay it. Simple as that. There is no other way around it. The Nationals, they're not going to be getting out of this deal. And if you're Steven Strasburg, why would you take a pay chunk? Why would you take away money from it? Like, yes, morally, you would think that is the right thing to do, but still, as a businessman, as someone who makes money, why would you do that? It makes no sense for any part of this situation here. So it's a mess. The Nationals, they got to bring their brooms and clean this thing up because it's a bad look on just everything that you do out there. And it's another way of people saying, Lerners, you should probably sell at this moment. Now's a good time. We'll just have to see what happens moving forward. But next, let's talk some baseball. As Kiebert Ruiz, big year for him. This could be the year where Kiebert Ruiz finally breaks out. But most importantly, will it be, though? We'll discuss that after I tell you guys about our great friends over at FanDuel. And guys, when we talk about FanDuel, you need to know all the good things because the NBA is officially back. And get your buckets for your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and always much more. Some of my favorite things to do when the Wizards play, you have to fade the Wizards because you all know they have even won double-digit games. It's the middle of February. We're going into March soon. They still haven't won their 10th game. Simple as that. It's easy math. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. Again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot because FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now we get back into it with Kiebert Ruiz and kind of a big year for him because Kiebert Ruiz has been a pretty big deal here in town with the Nationals. Kiebert Ruiz, one of the main prospects back in that Max Scherzer, Trey Turner deal, was a top 30 prospect at the time, really across any site that you check. Kiebert Ruiz, ever since then, has had some good moments, but the moral of his career has always kind of been inconsistency. That is always kind of what has stockpiled him and has kind of held him back in a lot of different situations here. Back in 2022 was his first full entire season up in the majors with the Nationals, starting on opening day all the way through game 162. He had that season cut short because of, a groin injury, if you know what I mean. If you remember, then you remember. But still, Kiebert Ruiz, the hype has always been there. But it's time to start seeing results. So is this his breakout season? Is this where we see Kiebert Ruiz finally the top 30 prospect that we all imagine him to be? Is this the year that he finally kind of takes off and running? I think it is in a sense. I think Kiebert Ruiz, you've seen it at times enough to say that you can believe in Kiebert Ruiz. Obviously, the Nationals have said the same thing, giving him that extension last year in spring training, saying that this is someone that we can rely on for the next 8 or so years. Kiebert Ruiz is a fine prospect. He's got talent. Even defensively, he's got some talent, even then being one of the worst defensive catchers in all of baseball this last year. Kiebert Ruiz still has some talent behind the plate. But where he's got to take a step up just a little bit more and kind of get away from those defensive struggles is really at the plate. Because Kiebert Ruiz, over this last year or so, you've seen him at times go through hot stretches. Like if you remember back in Arizona in early to mid-May, Kiebert Ruiz was on just some fire streak where he was batting like 400 and over the course of a few weeks and was just killing the baseball, had a ton of power from both sides of the plate, and life was just looking good. But still, it just has not been able to happen over the course of a month. It hasn't been able to happen over the course of 2 months where he just stays hot and has that big hot streak. The thing with Kiebert Ruiz is, with more consistent playing time, which has kind of happened over the last few years, he did take a step up from 2022, by the way. But with more consistent playing time and having someone maybe like a Joey Gallo in the lineup to have another target on their back with the development of a Lane Thomas and a CJ Abrams and whichever other Nationals prospect that comes up, I think that is when you start to see a much better and more improved version of a Kiebert Ruiz. He's not going to go out there and be an all-star catcher at this point. He could be. He certainly has the talent for it. But where he's going to have to improve most and really show his worth and his value is at the plate, hitting from both sides. Because we've seen Kiebert Ruiz, left side of the plate, he's got a little bit of pop. He can put the ball out of the yard. And also from the right side of the plate. Being that switch hitting catcher, that is a valuable thing nowadays. Being sometimes solid at the least defensively is a little valuable, but still defensively, he's got his woes there. We've all seen that, and that's all been tracked right here on Locked On Nationals before. But where I want to see Kiebert Ruiz improve the most and where he should improve the most is probably his power categories here. Because over the years, you've seen it with him. Last year, he had 18 home runs compared to 7 and back in 2022. He could still do more, in my opinion. And certainly, you should probably expect more as well with this Nationals team moving forward. Because Kiebert Ruiz, the thing is here, his talent has always been there. It's always been there. You've seen it at the plate with the amount of times that he strikeouts. Only struck out 58 times over 136 games this last year. His numbers really improved in basically every single category. His slugging percentage from 2022 went up 49 points. His on-base percentage was down by a few points, but his batting average went up a little bit. His OPS went up by a very good amount of points as well. 27, which is 54 points, or 44 points rather, over the course of 2022 all the way through 2023. The numbers are there, but it's time to start putting this at more a consistent rate, to say the least, because that has always been the struggle with Kiebert Ruiz. Again, we've mentioned this so many times over the years. It feels as if you're watching him over the period of a 2-week clip and you're like, finally, he has arrived. And then the next few weeks, he's batting 180, has a 560 OPS, not hitting for power, swinging at pitches he shouldn't be swinging at, putting the ball on the ground, not really doing too much with it, and not having the power consistency that we all want to see from Kiebert Ruiz. And really at this point as well, people say, well, if he doesn't work out defensively behind the plate, put him at a DH. These numbers aren't DH worthy at this point. Maybe if you were to just focus solely on hitting, maybe it will help him. But still, that's not really what Kiebert Ruiz is supposed to be. That's not why he was a top prospect in all of baseball at one point. Not number one prospect, but still, he was a prized prospect by the Dodgers. They weren't giving up Kiebert Ruiz for nothing. They got back Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. Two very great, one Hall of Fame lock guaranteed with Max Scherzer, and Trey Turner, someone who could be a Hall of Famer someday if he keeps it up the way that he has been. So now with Kiebert Ruiz, it's as simple as this. You got to see more consistency. And with consistency, what that means is at the plate. Defensively, you're going to get what you get. He's not that great defensively. We've seen it from him. But what he can improve at is doing just a little bit more at the plate. Maybe worried about striking out a little bit more than you do. The strikeout percentage is great, but what does it really mean if you're not really putting the ball in play all that often? You're not really getting on base all that often as your OBP went down from last year to this year. You got to stay consistent, and that is the main kind of key word and phrase that you're going to hear from all the Nationals beat reporters, all the people who talk about the Nationals moving forward. You got to see consistency from Kiebert Ruiz because he's still there in there. He's still got potential, but it just has not come into fruition just yet. Next, let's talk about the Nationals signing Zach Davies, which has been a very interesting contract, in my opinion. A minor league deal in which he's fine. He's had his good years, but last year was a bad year for Zach Davies. We'll discuss that and what it means for the Nationals. For that, we'll tell you all about eBay Motors. And guys, passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Now let's get into the Nationals signing Zach Davies to a minor league deal. As Zach Davies, again, a former pretty good pitcher with the Arizona Diamondbacks, has had some good years, even back to his Milwaukee Brewers days. Very impressive at points in his career. Had a solid season with San Diego as well. Went to Arizona the last 2 years. In 2022 was relatively solid, but in 2023, the doors just got blown up. 82 innings pitched, had a 7 ERA in that time frame as well. Had a 62 ERA plus, well below major league average there. Very bad season. 72 strikeouts in those 82 innings pitched as well. 39 walks, and also 10 home runs given up in those 82 innings pitched. Is this the signing that is going to put the Nationals over? No. But here's also the thing. This is where the Nationals should be. You're not going to be going out there signing your big Blake Snell, the Cy Young winner from 2023. We're not in that market. Blake Snell's not going to be looking to join the Nationals either. That's breaking news to some people, but still, you're not going to be signing Blake Snell. Noah Syndergaard, you could potentially have him, but obviously, or honestly rather, I think I'd rather have Zach Davies than a Noah Syndergaard at this point. Zach Davies coming off a terrible year, but still he has showed promise in his past and ultimately hasn't necessarily been all too injured as well. He has had some bad seasons here. But this is one of those signings in which it's very Chad Kuhl-like from last year when you signed Chad Kuhl to a minors deal, hoping that he could crack the rotation. He did, and it did not work out, obviously, as he was cut loose really early on into that summer here. But Zach Davies is kind of in that same situation. He's going to start the year down in AAA Rochester unless some injury happens. Maybe you see the Nationals come up with a 6-man rotation to start the year, but I don't see that happening at any point in time. I don't think that's realistic whatsoever. But Zach Davies is not someone that you're going to go out there and, number one, you're not going to be buying his jersey. You shouldn't be, by the way. But still, Zach Davies, I'm not going to go out there and run the Nationals down for this and say how terrible the signing is, how bad of a look it is for this organization. It's not. This is where you should be. You should be taking these minor league deals. And also, by the way, Mike Rose even talked about this. They're done signing major league talent. You're going to be signing a lot of minor leaguers to fill some gaps and hoping that they can kind of turn their career around here in Washington, D.C. Is Zach Davies one of those guys? Maybe. But still, you can't really bank on that. Why would you? This isn't supposed to work out. It's just one of those things when you're in this rebuilding mode in which the Nationals are, it could turn around for this team. Maybe Zach Davies just needs an opportunity. Maybe he just needs to work with the Nationals and their staff. Who knows? Maybe Jim Hickey is going to untap some serious potential with Zach Davies. That's sort of a joke, but sort of not. You sit here today, you're expecting the world from this Nationals team in 2024. You shouldn't. It's probably not going to happen. In fact, it ain't going to happen. Signing Zach Davies, whatever. It's a blimp in the radar. If you're upset about it, I don't know what to tell you. This is where the Nationals are going to be shopping. They're going to be bargain shopping because you're in this rebuild. Thank you all for making Locked On Nats your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And next, tomorrow's show, kind of get into more of some spring training news. who knows what drama could be coming up. But obviously, people are going to be on Steven Strasburg talk and watch and see what will happen with this franchise icon. Will the Nationals just finally just end the charade and get this thing over with? We'll have to see. But of course, thank you all for making Locked On Nats your first listen. I'll catch you on the flip side.